Biden gets a rousing ovation from Democrats as he gives Harris an enthusiastic endorsement. President Biden delivered his valedictory address to the Democratic National Convention on Monday night, as his decision to end his re-election bid released newfound energy within his party, with Vice President Kamala Harris's elevation to the top of the ticket. After 52 years rising to the pinnacle of influence within his party, Biden received a hero's welcome for the act of stepping aside for Harris, weeks after many in his party were pressuring him to drop his bid for re-election. Meanwhile, Harris made an unannounced appearance on stage as the convention's primetime program began Monday evening to thank Biden for his leadership in advance of his speech later on. The Democratic National Convention set up its first night to feature speeches from the last Democrat to lose to Donald Trump and the last one to beat him. Hillary Clinton spoke about finally breaking the glass ceiling to elect a female president. Joe Biden was scheduled to be the final speaker in Chicago on Monday night, even as protesters against the war in Gaza churned a few blocks from the convention hall. Speaking in his political hometown of Chicago, Barack Obama will honor President Biden's legacy after his exit from the campaign while making the case for another historic figure, Vice President Kamala Harris. It's poised to be a significant moment as she takes on former President Donald Trump in a matchup that features the same cultural and ideological fissures Obama warned against 2 decades ago. "President Obama is still a North Star in the party," said Illinois Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, who credits the 44th president with helping her become her state's first black woman lieutenant governor. Besides Harris herself on Thursday, Stratton said, "No voice this week is more integral to stirring Democrats, reaching independents and cajoling moderate Republicans than Obama. He knows how to get across the finish line," she said. The Democratic National Convention heads into its second day on Tuesday. With President Joe Biden having addressed delegates, the week's full focus now turns to Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, as the party and its leaders aim to argue why their new nominee is best suited to be in the White House over the Republican nominee, former President Donald Trump. President Joe Biden praised his administration's accomplishments and declared his vice president a worthy successor on the first night of the Democratic National Convention. On Monday, Biden's speech capped a night in which Democratic lawmakers and party stalwarts praised Vice President Kamala Harris, warned repeatedly that former President Donald Trump was unfit for office, and celebrated Biden's legacy. Here's a look at some of their claims. President Biden wrapped up the convention's opening night by beginning his long political farewell with an address that both framed his own legacy and signaled he was ready to start ceding control of the party to Vice President Harris. After an affectionate opening from the crowd, Biden spent long stretches of his 50-minute speech lacing into Trump, returning to a key theme of the re-election campaign he's no longer running. Biden ticked through many of his administration's achievements and shared the credit with Harris. But the convention ran so late that Biden took the stage after prime time had ended in much of the country. Biden called Harris a close friend and said picking her as his running mate was the best decision he ever made. He also vowed to help get the new Democratic ticket elected, promising to be the best volunteer that Harris and Walz have ever seen. Biden's mention of protesters on the street, who he said have a point, drew a chorus of boos from some pro-Palestinian activists watching the speech at Billy Goat's Tavern, just outside the convention center. "It's phony. They all know it," said Deborah Rosario, a 57-year-old Bronx resident who traveled to Chicago to protest outside the DNC. "But I'm not surprised. Democrats both sides it. They say I feel you, and then they do the opposite." Moments after Biden finished his speech, Harris and her husband, Doug Emhoff, walked on stage to hug the president and First Lady Jill Biden. Other relatives soon followed, including Biden's son Hunter. Harris hugged Biden and said something that made both react in a way that looked very personal. In a statement, convention organizers said that lengthy applause was interrupting speaker after speaker, and that they'd ultimately skipped elements of our program to ensure we could get to President Biden as quickly as possible so that he could speak directly to the American people. Musician James Taylor had been scheduled to perform before Biden but didn't. The convention started late and ran more than an hour behind schedule, stretching past midnight on the East Coast. Still, organizers insisted. We are proud of the electric atmosphere in our convention hall and proud that our convention is showcasing the broad and diverse coalition behind the Harris Walls ticket throughout the week on and off the stage.